Yes, there was consensus around the IRG table on Sunday the 13th. And that was something we heard from the very beginning. CSIS continued to say from the beginning of the protest, we haven't yet, under the CSIS Act, reached a level of threats to Canada. There was no voice saying, hold it, we don't think you should do this, or I don't think you should do this.
When the law as it is written doesn't suit your narrative or your political purposes, if you're the Trudeau Liberals, what do? Well, you broaden it, you redefine it, and you get your army of bureaucrats to help you along the way to do that very thing. Hello, I'm Adrienne Batra. With me is Brian Lilley. Brian, of course, I'm referring to Prime Minister Justin Trudeau finally coming forward to testify at the Emergencies Act inquiry. All week, we've been hearing from advisors, securities agencies that the convoy didn't reach the threshold of what would be deemed an emergency in Canada, but they turned around and were helpful to the Liberals and just redefined what a threat to Canada means. So what did Justin Trudeau have to say?
A little bit of a different tact. It's interesting because you're right. We heard from David Vino, the head of CSIS, who said, yes, we did a threat assessment and it did not meet the threshold. But, you know, I spoke to some Justice Department lawyers and they assured me that it did meet the threshold if you looked at it within a broader context, with a different definition of what constitutes a threat to national security. We heard that from Jody Thomas, the national security advisor, from Janice Charette, the clerk of the Privy Council. We've heard it from ministers, including Justice Minister David Lametti, who admitted that there's a legal opinion out there that you don't have to rely on the CSIS Act, but that he would not share that with the commission or the public. You know, Justice Rillo rightly saying, how am I supposed to determine if you were justified in invoking the act if you won't tell me why? And he just said, solicitor-client privilege. Well, right. I expected more of that from Trudeau. Instead, what he was saying is that you have to read the definition of what constitutes a threat to national security within a different context. That he wasn't so much relying on a different definition, more that there's a different context when you're reading it in the national security, the Emergencies Act file. I'm not sure that I buy it, but I'm also not sure that it matters. This is an inquiry, Adrienne, where those people who care about it have their minds made up one way or the other, and the rest of the country just wants to move on. So I'm not sure that it's going to matter in terms of public opinion.
So no bombshell revelations from Prime Minister Trudeau. I don't think that any of us were expecting that. It's not a very common scene when you see a sitting prime minister, put before an inquiry to rationalize and justify an act that his government invoked against the advice of many, many others, and again, not rising to the threshold that we all think the convoy was at. It didn't rise to that level. But that all said, this week itself has been an interesting sort of culmination of events. We heard two of the senior cabinet ministers, Lametti and Mendicino, musing about tanks, using tanks against Canadian citizens. Look, I served in our forces, as did you. I mean, you don't joke about those sorts of things. You don't muse about using military or artillery against Canadian citizens for doing what is their constitutional right and is the right to protest. I find that whole narrative so appalling, so disgusting. But again, no one's going to hold the Liberals accountable, perhaps only us at the Toronto Sun, some of us in the media. But this doesn't lay any, this is no laws. They're not going to get punished for breaking any laws. Really, this is just about accountability.
Yes, and we'll see what the commission says when they come out with their report in end of February, I believe it is. I think around February 25th. Look, it was a bumpy week at times for the Trudeau government at the commission, with all this talk of, a new definition that they wouldn't release, with the discussion about calling in the military. And, lots of government defenders were saying, well, talk of tanks, that was just a joke. Well, we don't accept that when other people make bad jokes. You say that's wrong. You don't make those kind of statements. But that statement about the tanks came after after Lametti told Mendicino, urged him to use the military to quell a protest. The justice minister, a law professor, should know better than that. But by the end of the week, when Trudeau's testifying, look, I'll give him credit. He was very smooth on the stand. And, I saw all the comments beforehand, his critics saying he'll be, and not know what to say. No, he's
smooth. Performative.
He was smooth.
Yeah.
He is his government's best salesman. There's a reason he's won 3 elections. You can dismiss him all you want, but you do so at your own peril. So in the public relations war, I think he scored a win on Friday. Do I think that he made the case that they met the legal threshold? No, I don't think so. I think the best thing that the government has done this week is made the case that you need to amend the Emergencies Act, because I wouldn't be opposed to saying something like economic harm should be included in the Emergencies Act going forward. If you're going to shut down the Ambassador Bridge at Windsor and potentially destroy thousands of jobs in the manufacturing sector, yeah, I'm not against governments having power to stop that if the regular laws can't be used. In this case, they were. But there's an argument for that. The government has been trying this week to make the argument that economic harm was there, so they invoked the act. But right now, that's not covered by the act. So maybe they made a good case for future amendments. They didn't make a case that their actions this time were justified.
Okay, let's wrap up by talking about what's happening on the other side. We've got the lawyer representing the truckers. What's going on with this guy? Why does he keep getting tossed out? And why is there so many theatrics around him?
He has had some good appearances and gotten some good information out there, but among the lawyers who are representing groups opposed to the invocation of the Emergencies Act, he is the least effective, because he's playing to Twitter, he's playing to the crowd, he's playing for headlines, which is why he's talking about, who was it that held the Nazi flag? That is irrelevant to the main question before this inquiry. I don't care how excited it makes you. I don't care how much you want to know, or you want to claim that it's a liberal and make false claims about it being a specific person at a government relations firm. I don't care how much that gets your followers excited. It does nothing to advance what his case and cause should be, which is to say that the government was not justified. He wasted time asking David Vino, the head of CSIS, about this, when he could have been asking Vino about his contradiction of endorsing using the Emergencies Act while at the same time saying there was no threat to national security. He could have been asking Chrystia Freeland about the decision to freeze bank accounts and how drastic and dramatic that was, instead of going down these rabbit holes. And then, the other day he chases someone down the hall claiming it's the supposed flag bearer. It's not even the guy who he thought it was, and he embarrasses himself. There are far more effective lawyers with the Canadian Constitution Foundation, the Justice Centre for Constitutional Freedoms, the Canadian Civil Liberties Association. They've done a solid job. Brendan Miller at times comes across as the stereotype of what the people opposed to the convoy want to think of them all as, country buffoons.
Yeah. So let's look forward then. Now that the Prime Minister has wrapped up his testimony, maybe we thought that was going to be the penultimate moment. Turned out to not quite be the case. But that all said, what's next?
Well, the different lawyers representing the Government of Canada, Commission Council, the various groups on cross-examination, most of which I've just mentioned, as well as lawyers representing the Ottawa Police, the OPP, and others, they're going to make their final submissions. They will make their legal arguments on, what their position is. Was the threshold met? Was it not? They'll answer the other questions that Cabinet put forward in their terms of reference. After that is done, and that should probably wrap up by the end of this year, by the end of December, then Justice Rouleau will contemplate and begin writing his report. I can't imagine how long and onerous a task that will be. I'm not sure that it will become book-length form, but it might be. and I've written a book. It is a long, horrible, soul-crushing task, and he's got from now until the end of February to do it, unless somehow they go to Parliament and grant him an extension.
Well, we want to hear from you. What do you think? Did the Trudeau government overstep, or were they justified in invoking the Emergencies Act? Log on to Facebook and Twitter and go to thetorontosun.com and hit that subscribe button so you can read all about Brian's coverage on this story and other types of stories you will not find anywhere else.